Welcome, everybody, to our fifth episode of the Chai na AI podcast, where we have AI conversations brewed in Africa and look to make AI practical, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Gugu, and today I'm super excited to be hosting another Steve, who's my friend, and I think one of the early adopters of AI, who's doing many things. I thought I do many things, but Steve, I always ask him when we catch up, how does he get the energy to do all those things? How does he fit them in? And I'm sure AI has to come in somewhere. So we'll hear how he's able to do those things. But before I introduce him, allow me just to speak about the previous episode that we had, where we hosted Samora Karaoke, who's the founder at Frontier FinTech and also the F Squared podcast. We had some really interesting conversations around AI and in the fintech space. We spoke about that for AI to really have an impact in the fintech space, in the traditional banking space, we really need to be asking who's in the room when the AI conversation is being had. And those people need to be AI champions so that they can be able to move the conversation forward. We also discussed the idea that AI's biggest value comes from process redesign and not from a simple automation, which I really like. I like that as a concept because people just think it's just about adding AI to everything you're doing, but it's really just going back to first principles and ask if AI was there when you were starting to do this, how would we do it differently, right? And just redesigning the entire process. I like that about that. We spoke about where the potential impact for AI in fintech would be in this case. And one of the biggest areas that Samora spoke about is a credit scoring and lending area where a lot of analysis could be improved, where even people who previously could not qualify for loans could be able to access loans, SMEs, individuals, and so forth, and just being able to personalize credit scoring to each individual person by taking all the different pieces of data. Of course, we spoke about so many other bits. Was a really powerful session. So if you want to, you can listen to that. You can go back to our Spotify, go back to our YouTube channel. Of course, we also have a newsletter, China AI, and you'll be able to pick that conversation from there. So now moving to my good friend, Steve Tawia. So I'm going to try and introduce him, but I know I will not do this justice. So I know Steve, first of all, as an investor. He's an angel investor. He's a venture capital investor in the healthcare space, doing some really exciting stuff. I think one of the, in my view, very passionate about getting capital to African founders and especially the right founders. On top of that, I know he does several other things in terms of, having an impact in the ecosystem in Ghana and across the continent. He's one of the people who've been involved in the Ghana angel investing ecosystem and really trying to, take that up and really get more Ghanaian startups funding and get Ghanaian angels to understand what angel investing is all about and to be able to deploy capital. He does a lot of advisory, he has public roles and so forth. So I'm gonna stop there, Steve, and ask: have I done justice? Is there something I should have added on top of everything I've said?
No, but I think you said the core of it, which actually is a good thing because sometimes I wonder how people perceive me, and that's actually something very good that you just pointed out to the key things that I do. Thank you. Really great to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
here at China AI, and really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. And Steve is very humble. Yeah? He's not mentioned that if you're in the continent, you're thinking about setting up a fund anywhere across the continent. He has a specific
Yeah.
skill set, having sat both on the LP side, sat on the GP side, sat on the design side.
Yeah.
And so if that's one of the key things you're sort of like suffering with and you need to talk to someone, I think Steve is the right person to speak to. But today we want to talk about
Thank you.
how
I
Steve is able
appreciate
to do
it.
yeah. We want to talk about how Steve is able to have to do a million things while the rest of us are just doing 10 things. So, Steve, let me start this by
Yes.
asking
I
this
don't
simple
sleep
question.
much. Yes.
I want to start with this first simple question. AI, right? When for you did you sort of like start taking notice of AI? When were you just like, okay, this thing is critical? What happened at that point? Did you use, a specific tool? Is it something you read? And maybe just take us back to that.
It's a bit of a strange one because what people call AI today, for me, has always been there from a long time ago, where when I was interviewing for roles in the past, I used to tell interviewers when I wanted to be provocative, I'm a lazy guy, just to push on the fact that they think black people are lazy. Right. So they're usually shocked. I say, look, I'm a friend. I do not like doing the same thing two times, like repetitive task. That's not me. And to very early on in my career, I was automating mini tasks, doing mini programs on old PCs, running command prompts on Linux, on PC, assembly PC, coding, etc. from the early days to essentially automate myself. So when the huge craze of AI came, I wasn't really surprised. It's just where I was pretty impressed was the scale and the speed of change, right? And so the anecdote is that during COVID, I was quote unquote bored, stuck at home, and I decided to, go on Coursera and go through the Andrew Ng courses on AI. That was, during COVID time, 2020, March, April, May, June. So I did a number of courses without the degrees. I didn't need the certificates, etc. Really went into hardcore stuff. And that reminded me of my financial engineering days when I was in trading and doing, financial engineering, exotic derivatives where we're doing some matrix calculation, risk analysis, etc. I say, okay, going back to fundamentals of things I've done way back in the past that haven't been that useful on the continent, but therefore AI was very interesting. And so I was already interested in AI, did courses. And then when ChatGPT launched, it was phenomenal. And what I would say is that it took me a bit of time to get into the ChatGPT and all the chatbot bandwagon because my red alert was very, very high on the fact that I'm a data person. And I was thinking to myself, look, this is copyrighted data that people train their model on. And that means that, and that's something I've learned back in 98, anything that goes on the internet is public, even if you think it's private. I've had the personal experience where we were using a genealogy website for the whole family. It was meant to be private, and suddenly they changed their privacy rules, and then that became searchable online. I say, are you mad? I've put my personal genealogy data. I've sent emails to my family for them to log on and put their own families who were building on a social basis our genealogy data. And then suddenly you tell me it's public? Are you mad? So I told my whole family to
And it was
cancel it
mad
out.
retroactively, not going forward.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, absolutely. And so I told my family to delete everything. We removed everything there. And then we started sending emails to the company so that they removed that public facing access. It's not normal. And so when AI came, I was very, very cautious and I was telling everyone around me, do not put any personal, private, confidential data on a chatbot because according to the fine print, it's no longer yours. That means that if you put your personal information, somebody else at the other side of the world in Indonesia, wherever the person is going to be, can do a search and find out that data because you made it available. So I was very, very cautious of the use of ChatGPT in the early days. But then very quickly I realized, okay, that's interesting. Basically, I have a thinking partner that I can ask very generic and very specific questions that can give me a fairly reliable answer. That was level one of
Steve,
that, right?
Steve, let me just go back. I like what you've said, but first of all, there's people who are already worried at this point. We're just like anything you put online can be used by someone else in a different space. AI, for all intents and purposes, is taking your information, it's loading onto a model, it's trying to sort of like figure out, then it's giving you a response, right? So first of all, how did you solve that element? At what point did you cross over and say, you know what, the data privacy concerns are outweighed by, I guess, the utility? Or what gave you the level of confidence that you now have when using AI on a day-to-day basis? Maybe let's just speak about that. There's several other things I could ask you, but I just wanted to start there.
No problem. So what I would say is that to this day, I'm always very cautious about what information I ask any of the LLMs. That's number one. Meaning, I'm happy to put my CV because that's something that is public already. LinkedIn, all these things, and my information. If you Google Sewu-Steve Tawia or go to any of the GPTs, it will go online and look for the information. So there's hardly anything I need to hide already because the information is already available, right? Anything beyond that, I will not do. So I give you very striking examples of uses of AI that I feel have helped me crack certain codes or crack certain processes. One is now very often when I'm going to meet an individual, a person, I search their name via any of the LLMs and say, look, what is important to this person? If I'm approaching this person for XYZ, how should I go about it? And based on the public information that is available, GPT or Perplexity or Claude will give me, okay, this is how you should have a conversation with this person. That's what matters to them on the basis of what international information is there, right? That's what I do. And I found it quite fascinating to go to the person level. That's number one. Number two is I use it quite a lot for request for proposals, building pitch decks, reviewing processes, and even just searching a company or a founder of a company. And one interesting thing that I did recently that really blew my mind is that, sometimes for certain stakeholders, you need to do PEP analysis. PEP is politically exposed persons analysis. Before, you had to have somebody who has a database, access to a database, and all these things, right? So that you can see whether there are hits on that particular name or this particular entity that gives you potential risks, right? Guess what? I just typed the full company name with all the bells and whistle, and basically gave me the PEP analysis. I can do that for a person or for a corporate. And I will even prompt it in such a way that you can tell, okay, look for the key PEP databases that are used by the World Bank, whatever it is, and give me the potential hit on this entity or this person. I don't need to go and pay a subscription fee anymore.
I like that use case. And actually, on one of them, I've created my ChatGPT in such a way that I have one project which I trained. I gave it instructions where I call it "Who am I meeting?"
Yes.
And so whenever I'm meeting with anyone, I just type their name. Then it will give me a sense of that person, what they care about, what they don't care about, based on publicly available information, of course. And what's the linkage between our conversations. And I found that to be quite useful because, there are times you'll go and ask people some very basic questions about themselves that you could have researched. But whenever I read that, then we start a conversation at a different level. And also we are able to get to the right wavelength pretty fast. And so we're able to start thinking about what can we solve together and everything. I can mention, hey, I realize that you really care about this because of this article that you wrote about this point. And so I found that to be quite useful. So I like that use case. And the PEP one, because for people who are doing due diligence, making investments and so forth, I think it's pretty powerful. But Steve, maybe just going back, you're bored, you decide to Coursera and do an AI course.
No, just one. No, it's a whole series. Not just one, a whole series.
A whole series. Okay. Some of us, when you're bored, we go for a walk or we go watch Netflix series. But that aside, I'm just curious, maybe just for the people who are listening, what's your background? Because it seems, you're already tinkering a lot with technology, with, I think machine learning to a certain extent, even before AI was a big thing.
Absolutely. So I would say I've always been somebody very curious about different sectors, different things in life. Okay. So I give you so a few data points, right? I built my first notepad-based website in 98. Literally, I said, look, I'm going to try this thing. It seems pretty cool. Went on Notepad, type HTML, put the thing, /bolds, close the bold and then save it at the HTML, open the browser, and then I saw my page. I was, like crazy. And I built a website, did things, many other things. Okay. Data point number 2, after that, when I was at a university in Maastricht, University in Netherlands, with a colleague of mine, friend of mine, we had a network access server in our dormitory that we're using to build website and hosting the website on the network access servers for companies in Maastricht. That was 2000. Okay.
Amazing.
Fast forward after, I was still using network access servers, NAS servers. I had one in my house. I was putting it to download movies and I was trading on a trading desk. I was stream a movie to my desk via a VPN and be watching the movie from the desk, right?
We hope your employer then is not listening to the podcast.
No. Actually, I'll tell you what. After some time, the IT guys came to me and said, look, at certain times in the evening, we've seen traffic come to your laptop. What's going on here? We spotted that you've been streaming stuff to your desktop. We want to see what you're doing. I say, hey, you don't worry. Okay, I'll stop. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so you've always been a tinker. You've always been curious about fixing stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. I used to dismantle computers, open them, change the motherboard, change PCs, weld them back, etc. So the whole idea is that before, so I was educated in France, and before, so I was doing science and then electro engineering. So literally, I was in these blue overalls doing tinkering with engineering stuff. And then I went to business and then did a Grande École, which is a kind of business school in France. But all my life to this day, I've always been tinkering across different things: hardware, software, languages, investments. I'm probably one
Amazing.
of the only person chartered Islamic finance executive on the continent, because at some point I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, what's this Islamic finance thing? Decided to do a certificate on it. Spent 2.5 years to do it. I've got it.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
also
Yeah, yeah.
CDFP certified. You know, digital
Ish.
finance. So and
Steve,
so
I
on.
have
So
to
it's
say
just
that
curiosity.
when you're bored, you do some really interesting things. But now, let's come back to the AI story just for a second. So I'm just curious. So now, let's maybe move the clock to a certain extent.
Sure.
You move through this phase, and I don't think we resolve this. Probably let's resolve this fast. So at the moment, what's your view about the data privacy concerns on the different LLMs? And I ask that from a perspective. One of the ways that, if you go for any training on AI, they'll tell you is that if you go to the settings, there's a button that you can just turn off, in this case, which says, do not use, my
My
content
data for
to train the
training.
model. Right.
Yes.
So do you believe that when you turn it off, then it actually turns it off? Do you think in the background, they're just like, okay, we will do that, but then they're using your data? And how should we be thinking about that? How do you think about that privacy aspect?
So on that, we should all do it. And even one that is directly related to that is the recent changes in WhatsApp groups parameters. I don't know if you saw, but if you do not change that particular parameter on WhatsApp group, they can use conversations in WhatsApp groups as training data for the models. There's a particular switch to put in on WhatsApp group to prevent them from doing that. But again, across most of the LLMs, that's what needs to be done. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, to be honest with you. So I would assume that if they did not comply, governments, etc., will go after them and say, look, guys, you promise you do this, but actually we see that on the back end, you're doing it, you're going to get billions of dollars of fines for using public information, right? So that's, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. Now, what I always say is that so long as you do not put critical confidential data that is not yours on the platforms, even if you protect it, that's also another element. I'll give you an example. We look at investments all the time. Founders give us access to their data room, but then do we allow our own agents to go and look into the data room, put information, report it back to us, and then we use that for third-party stuff without their consent? And that's where the fine line has to be taken. So before, a lot of the founders were asking, sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, right? And before, investors would say, NDA is happy to sign it, but honestly, to enforce it is going to be difficult. So a lot of founders say, I don't need to sign this thing anyway. I'm going to give access. So that means that a recommendation for founders is put in the data room anything that is not truly proprietary, that is not IPable. Keep the IPable, the truly proprietary stuff out of the data room. And when an investor wants to have a look at it and better understand it, do a demo, get the technical person to get access to it restricted in a way that protects your IP ultimately. Okay. That's what I would recommend. Us as investors, I think we need to be mindful enough to also look at the boundaries that we can breach or not regarding these things, right? Unfortunately, there are rogue investors that would pick information from a company and
Use
somehow
it on there.
another company in their portfolio would have information and then use it. And that is utterly wrong. And I know in the US it happens, Europe it happens, etc. But I think for us, because of the level of trust or distrust or mistrust we have, we can't allow us to do this because that will kill the business, essentially.
Okay. So I like what you've just said in terms of, so first of all, making sure your settings on AI are okay, and I really think it, taking this idea of data privacy seriously, and asking yourself in a situation where you're sharing data in a data room, whether you're an entrepreneur, in whichever sense, just thinking twice about it, right? So that it doesn't show up somewhere else, because you also do not know the settings that the other person has put in whatever agents they're using in this case, and where that information may be used. That's Really good point. But then now just then continuing with our original conversation, just so I'm curious. So now you get into AI, and I know you're a power user, right? So when you start tinkering, and I know how to ask this, first of all, what has been exciting for you when you've started tinkering? What are sort of like some of the amazing use cases that now you're seeing that you're just like, wow, this is amazing? Because I
Yeah.
know you're doing investing, you're doing advisory, you're doing all manner of
Yeah.
interesting things.
Yeah. No, very good point. So one of the things that really got me quite interested about a year ago is NotebookLM, right? The use of that plus other models that plugs in, because what you can do is, as you mentioned, you can create a second, third, fourth, whatever number of brains that essentially replicates you for certain part of what you're thinking. Okay. So in NotebookLM, you can create several notebooks and you put data and information, links, videos, etc., about thematics of interest to you, and then train a model based on that limited or information plus access to internet if you want on a specific subject that is of interest to you. And then you can use that as your second brain to think about things. Okay. And funny enough, then you can plug this NotebookLM brain, I would call it, into an agent like a Claude or else that can execute tasks on your behalf, right?
So, this is fascinating. So, just give us a use case where you've done this, because I'm just curious how this plays out, because this is fascinating for me.
Yeah. So, for instance, I write a number of RFPs, etc. Okay, requests for proposals, and proposals and things like that. So, I'll tell them, look, this is the template I'm using for, let's say, Jazarift, my healthcare investment company. These are the RFPs I've answered into before, and this is how I structured it. Okay. Now I've seen this new RFP. Here's the link, drag and drop, or copy paste the link, whatever it is, and then generate me a new proposal using our own data and that of the RFP to create a new proposal. Okay. In Notebook
No,
LM, it does not always
keep going.
create the document that we need. So I can say, look, actually, Notebook LM, use my Claude access here, and then ask Claude to generate a document and even an Excel sheet, because Claude does that, like a financial proposal, etc., in such a way. Or I'll take Notebook LM, generate a prompt for me to get Claude, so I'll copy paste it into Claude to generate the documents for me that correspond. So I don't even think about the prompt anymore. I get NotebookLM to generate the prompt for me. Okay. Same thing, you can do that for Gamma. So do you know Gamma?
Yes, I know Gamma. The one for doing
presentations.
PPT slides.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Same thing. You can ask NotebookLM to do the prompting for you and then copy paste into Gamma. Ideally, if you can integrate both two, then you don't need to do copy paste, but I haven't gotten there yet, right? So that's an example of ways that can be done. The other one that I find quite interesting these days is procedure modeling, where I can say, look, NotebookLM, model this procedure. I want you to use BPM, business process modeling standards, right? I'll drag and drop a document, an internal procedure document from a company, and say, look, model this one thing for me as a BPM, business process modeling standard, and then it can do it for me. And then I look at the process. I can even ask it to optimize it. So instead of try and optimize this process, maybe are there any steps that can be skipped and then to go faster, etc. So playing around models like that. Yeah.
No, wow. I like those use cases, because then, what you're really doing is now going to the next level, which I find that most people are just in the initial level of just prompting, where they're just sort of like texting, they're having a chat in this case. They're not getting real, an RFP done. As you mentioned, a financial model done in this case that you're able then to review. And Steve, I'll tell you, there's a new standard called, not new, international standard called FAST. That we use for our work. Maybe you should try that also. Flexible, appropriate, structured, and transparent financial modeling. It also produces some really good models. One of the key things we are trying to do as an organization is then to create, I think we've done it to a certain extent. We just need to get it to the next level, where it improves its accuracy and its delivery. It's a fast agent, right? Which knows the fast standards really well. And so it's able to help us to build financial models. Nice. And it's been exciting to see how that's developing in this case. So I like that as a use case.
We can exchange on that one.
Yes. Happy to exchange on these aspects. You see, we know the business, the BPN, standard, we looked at it at the beginning when we were starting, and we felt fast was probably much better for us. So, and it's much easier to execute. But it's always good to know what other people are doing on the other side. Steve, so really useful use cases. So I want you just maybe, because I know you're a deep thinker, or do you
Okay.
want to add something before?
Yes, I just wanted to add something. So, as part of this new methodology around using AI systems, etc., we developed a new proposal for SMEs, and I'll mention that to you now. So, our thesis is that obviously you need to review companies' processes, etc., sales, marketing, finance function, etc., etc. But now we feel that that is kind of the baseline that everybody should be doing. The next level is what we call the O framework, AWE framework, where we're saying for companies, we'll come in and use AI systems and workflow automation. That's the A. AI systems and workflow automation to essentially say what I just told you about. Like we look at your procedures, we look at your processes, the workflows, etc. And we're going to try and optimize those workflows and processes and overlay AI on top of it. That can only happen when you have one single data truth for data layer. And
Yep.
then we have a unified process library that we can use to train the model and then help you optimize it. Typically, it can be, a process that can be generating like a WhatsApp bot that that responds to the backend with all this information and can really have a conversation that is structured. That's the A. Once you've done that, we believe that one of the key value added support we can give to startups and SMEs and growing and scaling organizations is the W for all, AWE. U is working capital optimization. A lot of founders want to raise capital, but truly, when you look deeper into it, especially if they're generating a bit of cash flow, etc., it's really working capital optimization, reducing the inventory days, reducing the conversion of receivable into cash, supplier credit, all these things, reduce the time to convert revenue into cash in their company. So working capital optimization, that's the W. And the E is exit preparation and valuation. Because once you've done the optimization of the systems, your financial and cash optimization, guess what? The value of your company is going to increase with governance and other parameters, obviously. That means that we have a better valuation of your company and we can help you exit, meaning find the right partners to acquire you or get the right partners to invest in you. Right.
Yeah.
That's what we call the exit preparation and valuation. And this is an offering that we've discussed with certain partners that we're actively having conversation with to really come in to support portfolio companies or funds, even our own companies and others to get to the next level by using AI at our level on the continent, right? It's not
Yeah.
the AI agents yet, but we eventually will get there. But let's start with the baseline, which is clean data, clean processes, clean cash flow, financial management. And then that means
Yep.
that the value of a company should be higher and then can help you by even doing an independent valuation of your company as an additional service. Yeah.
And I have to say, I really like what you've said, right? Because with these O framework, AI systems and workflow automation, then working capital optimization, then exit preparation, it's really answering a question that I've seen popping up quite a bit in different conversations, which is, so after we've applied all these AI, we've given everybody in the company access to, I don't know, whether it's Copilot, whether it's Claude, whether it's
What's the
ChatGPT.
output?
At the end of the year, right, when you look at our bottom line, has that increased? When you look at our sales, has that increased? When you look at the quality of the quality of work in our organization, if you have to measure that, can we say that people now have much better, work-life balance or something? Like, what's our metric of success in this
KPI.
case,
Yeah,
and has that moved, right?
exactly.
Because some AI is just, it creates more work and doesn't necessarily go to a specific output, which I found to be an interesting conversation. So what you're speaking about here is a very systematic way that an organization can take their AI use and say, you know what, are we being able, first of all, our process flows, then secondly, get to our working capital, which is, you say it's a lifeblood for a company, right? You optimize your working flow, you have more cash, you have less cost in terms of your current liabilities in this case, and then it improves from an exit perspective. So maybe just delving on that just for a second, how has that been? Have you already rolled that out in some companies? Are you able to walk us through maybe one company where you did this and what kind of impact you
So
saw?
no, absolutely. So one of the things we've been doing notably in Ghana, and we're trying to do one with a Kenyan company, but in Ghana, we really started. We haven't really gone through the whole process, to be honest with you. But what we've seen in the little process optimization we've done is clearly way better understanding of how even the organization functions, right? That's a key step
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
Again, this is a process we've tried with a Ghanaian company, and that we've modeled accordingly to that. But we haven't really had the time to get to the bottom of which is independent valuation and the exit preparation. There's a
Yeah. Yeah.
few prospects that are mostly driven by private equity and venture capital funds who are at their year 6, 7 and of holding company. They want to exit, obviously, right? And this is where we are being brought in to do that. So on the Ghana side, yeah. On the Kenya side, there's a company that we're working with. We're at the early stages. We haven't gotten outputs already. I have to be
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
clear. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But just something that we've tried to do internally, which I think is very useful, because at times people find some of these concepts a bit, in the air, and you want to put them on the ground. Something
Yeah.
we did is where we took everybody's KPI, a document, and we dropped that into ChatGPT, whatever agent that you use, so whatever LLM that you use, and we ask it, if you look at these JD, what elements can you be able to automate to improve this person's productivity next, right? Then it gave us sort of like some interesting ideas. And now the next step for us is just coming back and say,
Implement.
what, can we now start pick maybe 2 use cases per person across the
Yeah.
organization? And the
Yeah.
whole idea is this idea of just improving the output of the team so that we improve the bottom line, improve the quality of work and so forth. So I found that to be an interesting way of just thinking about how does this output come about. So it's very close to what you just mentioned in this case.
Absolutely. I think for us, the data infrastructure is a critical component on top of the procedures and the processes, and the JDs obviously are part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's got some companies have a lot of data. Steve, so I want to go one level up just for a second, because I know you're
Okay.
a deep thinker. So for you, when you sit down and sort of like look at AI use in the continent and so forth, there's the news that just came out the other day where Fable, the Claude most advanced model, you know,
Yeah.
was it was released, and then the next day the U.S. government comes up and says, "Sorry guys, we're gonna turn this off for non-U.S. citizen because it's a critical infrastructure." So to say,
Even
and
for
then I
US
ended up
citizens, yeah, they stopped it anyway for
yeah, even
everyone.
for you. But I wonder, I don't know, maybe you'll tell me. I wonder whether they're first of all turning it off for everyone so that they can identify the US citizens. And then they can be like, okay, let's put it on. Because the instructions, as I understand it, was for US citizens, for non US citizens. Anyway, okay, cool. Then just thinking about that, right? And the amount of power that these AI companies have, we are already starting to outsource part of our thinking. There's a friend of mine called Polaji, he runs a fund and we're trying to collaborate on the fund. And he did an amazing article just talking, the moment you outsource your thinking to a machine that's owned by someone else, just know one day they may just turn it off and then you're going to have some serious problem. So, and then, no, let me bring my question now. One of the key questions, one of the other conversations that's been going on is this idea of AI sovereignty, right? As a continent, how we remain sovereign, how do we remain sovereign while, all the models we're using are Western, right? All the social media tools we're using are Western. I don't know, all the ERPs or the biggest ERPs, Microsoft, Apple, whatever, Western. Right? How do we retain our sovereignty? How should we think about that question? So does that bother you? And how do you think about that as a question, as a continent? What do we need to be doing?
It's funny the way you're asking that question. I'm hearing the same very questions in Europe, meaning Europeans are asking themselves the same very question. Where actually Europe and Africa, and to some extent India, Latam, the rest of the world, basically, except from US and China, is asking itself the question. What I would say for specifically for Africa, and unfortunately, that's something I hate to say, but it's very true. A fish rots from the head. So if our leadership is not conscious about what is happening, how is it going to be for us at various levels to really make them conscious about it? In some countries, people are trying, even like Kenya or Ghana or South Africa to some extent, People are really trying to make that quite critical. But yeah, I mean, it bothers me, but what other solutions are out there with the scale of investment, the scale of, and the length of focus is out there, right? One thing I would say though, amongst these doom and gloom, I know companies, startups in Africa who are actually building foundational models that the West will not have access to for now because our paradigms are different. I read the statistics this morning. Do you know that 74% of global mobile money transactions are based in Africa?
That's fascinating.
74% of global money, mobile money transactions are in Africa. So what it tells me is that we have a different paradigm. So we shouldn't try and copy whatever the West is doing, just like China did before, probably now we're taking over the Western world, is copy, learn, adapt for us, improve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the question is, who do we want to copy? And I strongly believe that we as Africa, we need to look east more than west. Actually, let me put this. We need to look east for technology, west for capital, right? Right. Not to put all our eggs in the same basket, right? And so that's where I am. Maybe to push further, and I don't know if you had this conversation in your previous podcast, but the, my biggest challenge today on the continent is that we already had a massive deficit in power generation, electricity, power generation. Now with AI, the race, even in the US, even in Europe, China, forget, they're way ahead of everybody. But in Africa, there's a massive, massive effort we need to do for the next 10 years to triple or 10x even our energy generation, renewable or not. Because honestly, climate change is happening, but we have fundamental needs that need to be covered: food, shelter, health, etc. at that level. So my call to action to anybody who's listening is for AI to be truly productive and useful for us in Africa, we need to generate massive amounts of energy. Data
Because
centers,
it's yeah,
compute, everything. That's number one. Number two is we need to bring the AI skills gap at another level of urgency, notably by doing a stepwise process where we say digital skills, basic one. And then the next level is process automation, AI systems, AI agents, etc. Very
yeah,
quickly, what's going to happen is also, and that was an announcement by NVIDIA during the GTC that happened, their annual thing that happened in, is it Indonesia? I can't remember where it happened. But they announced major breakthroughs in hardware AI. So everybody's thinking software, all this, but NVIDIA just released a number of chips and systems that are focused on real life AI based on devices, sensors, etc., etc., etc. Okay. And this is going to be a game changer. And they even have a new partnership where they have a new AI chip that is coming up that Lenovo, HP, all these PC manufacturers are going to integrate to make our laptops that we're using even more AI driven with massive amounts of compute capacity, etc. They made the announcement at GTC. Okay. And this is a wave we should not miss, right? That
yeah.
means that actually with those kind of new laptop, you can run a, already can run a small language model on your
Yes.
laptop, but it can probably run now with those kind of laptop, a large language model, maybe with 1 terabyte of parameters locally, right? And so very quickly, hardware is also catching up to software to make things very, very attractive. And again, we have the opportunity on the continent because we don't have those legacy infrastructure to go one step further. And I'll mention one last thing on what is mind-boggling to me is I don't know.
Yeah, no, no. Let me ask the questions. Let me ask the questions.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, first of all, I like what you just mentioned that hardware is now catching up because one of the key questions, and I think we've had this conversation in this podcast where someone was saying that one of the key things we need to be thinking about is how do we get AI to the simplest devices in the continent because there's some devices the chips are like smartphones and so forth. When you try to load in the apps and so forth, it's it takes a lot of bandwidth, so it doesn't work as well. Part of it is just adoption, on a massive scale to make sure everybody can be able to get access to that. In some point in the future, we won't be saying we can use AI to be like the same way we use the phone or use the internet, right? To be about access. Everybody should have access so that they can be able to do what they need to do in this case. But of course, taking into account some of those risks that we just discussed a moment ago, where our governments do need to take this seriously. So that our brain is not the brain is not switched off, and then all of a sudden there's a crisis that's happening. So we need to finalize, and we have our signature questions. I think you've tried to allude to a few of them, but I'm going to ask them nonetheless because maybe there's going to be a different answer.
Okay.
So the first one is, for you, what's one AI habit that you've developed that saves you a lot of time?
Monday morning strategic conversations, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It has saved me a lot of time thinking strategically.
Okay. So when you're saying thinking strategically, is that you
So
sort of like having a
conversation,
conversation with someone?
conversation with an AI agent on So
Wow,
my
that's an
context is
exciting one.
particular. Yeah, my context is particular because I'm trying to consolidate all my activities into one or two main ones with sub activities, etc. And the conversations are really about optimizing, synchronizing, and really thinking strategically about that consolidation, and therefore also the go to market after that consolidation. So technically speaking, instead of hiring a McKinsey or BCG or Bain person to do strategic consulting for me, AI is one. And that I
Wow.
really,
So
for me,
that
it
is
helps a lot.
fascinating. So basically, you have this agent that you've trained, and I'm just wondering whether how you've sort of like prompted that training for that agent. And so on Monday, you switch it on and you start having a conversation on a
Yeah.
strategic issue that you're trying to explore.
Yes, absolutely. And also I have a work plan. It's like a coaching plan of sessions where we discuss things. So I said, oh, generate a session plan for me. These are the documents. This is the way I'm thinking. I've sent you the website, etc. How can I consolidate those things? Which areas do you think are interesting, considering who I am, what the companies I've built for the last 12 years, all these things. And then we go through thematics as we go. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I'm going to try that. That sounds fascinating. I never thought about that. That's why I
Yeah.
love this conversation, because we're trying to make AI practical by sharing
Yes,
use cases that people don't think about. Second question,
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
and I don't know that you've already mentioned it. What's one underrated AI breakthrough, we should be talking about that we're not talking about today?
So yeah, I kind of touched about it on the NVIDIA one, but I think the other one, when I mentioned energy, is what Meta did recently in the US. So because of the race for power and compute, Meta now is taking land wherever it is in the US and literally building data centers under like temporary shelter. So before data center, they took 24 to 36 months to build the physical infrastructure, build all the things. Now they're just doing warehouses that are built in 2 months and putting all the data centers in there, right? They're just racing against the clock. And that's huge because all the experts about data centers are saying, oh, these guys are mad. It's crazy to do these things. But the people at Meta are doing it. And they're having their own solar energy generation capacity there, etc. That is enable them to buy chips, etc. One last point regarding energy is, I don't know if you heard about SMR, small modular reactors. The technology is not totally proven yet. Some people have started to do it, but if it proves to be very commercially viable, we have a pathway to massively scale energy generation through small modular reactors. So imagine a quarter of a football pitch. This is a solar power thing that produces a certain megawatt of power, but it's reactor, like nuclear power, and then can stack them up. Right. If that breakthrough comes in, I strongly believe that that's going to be also quite massive for the continent.
Nice, nice, nice. I like that because energy indeed is one of the key constraints that everybody speaks about. Because transformers right now, I hear if you want to order a transformer, you're being given some really long lead times to be able to get those. Energy is one of the areas. And I like that we're already taking AI and applying it on, some of the key constraints in developing AI. I mean, in the next podcast, we'll discuss whether that's the end that's the end we need to be going for. In this case, just the race on AI, but that's a different conversation. Last question in this case: if you had unlimited AI resources, we gave you all the tokens you required, and we told you don't worry about that, what would you solve?
I would solve for African leadership.
I want to know how you're gonna solve for that because That's a good one. I want to solve for that also.
I honestly would spend a lot of time. Actually, maybe somebody should do it. I would put all the names and history of all the African presidents, current ones, profile them and figure out a go-to-market strategy to make them so miserable by cyber attacks, etc., to the extent that if they do not change their behavior, they will still be very miserable. And we reward publicly the good ones for good deeds. Otherwise, there'll be cyber attacks all the time. I'm mad, huh?
Steve, well, those are Steve's views. That's what he would solve. But that's interesting because I could see the dividends in something like that because indeed, if you look at the continent and what we need to solve for, we know what it is, but we need that strong leadership, and we've seen that in the countries where leaders have taken things with the level of seriousness that they deserves. The countries have moved, right? I don't want to name any names because either way, people
I
look
can
at
tell you,
leaders very differently.
Benin. I can tell you, Benin
Yeah,
next door with
yeah,
Talon. Within
yeah,
10 years, he's transformed the country to a level unprecedented. And Wadani, who just took after him, is going to take it to another level. And it really takes that generational change for true visionary stewards leaders. Because
yeah.
the reason why I'm solving for that is once you solve the leadership problem, energy, health, etc., become problems that are solvable because you can raise the capital, strike the right partnership because you have a clear sight of the direction. Whereas it's not the case today.
Yeah. I just hope that there would be, I don't know, an easier path rather than using the stick and the carrot
There's
to
none.
solve the leadership.
Since independence, which easier path has been there?
Yeah. Well, I guess once we give you unlimited AI resources and Mythos, in this case, no, so
Yeah,
Fable. This was
Fable,
Mythos or
Fable.
Fable. I think Mythos is one that was
Both.
put out completely. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was put out
any
completely.
of those, any of those.
Yes, once we give you that, I hope you can also just check whether there's one that we can apply that's not stick and carrot in this case. But Steve, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. We like to keep these sharp and quick, but lots to pick to chew on that in terms of the use cases that you're having for AI, in terms of just thinking about the whole issue of data privacy, thinking about the energy issue and how we sort of think about it from a continent perspective, and certainly how to ensure that you get good leaders in the continent. Thank you very much, Steve. I think we'll wrap up now. Do you have any last comment before I wrap up the episode?
No, reach out to me if you want to have tough conversations and look at partnerships potentially with either Asimi Partners, my advisory company, or Jazarif on the healthcare side. Happy to have a conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'll share your links as part of the podcast so that if someone wants to reach out, they can be able to reach out. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode. This is Stephen Gugu from China AI with Sewu-Steve Tawia, who's shared with us a lot in terms of how he uses AI. Please do take a listen. We'll also do a good newsletter out of this. So thank you. This is China AI, where we have AI conversations built in Africa and look to make AI practical, one conversation at a time. Thank you.
Thank you.